Breaking right now on Morning News Now, uncertainty in Venezuela and around the world after that surprise weekend attack by the U.S. Just hours from now, captured Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife set to face a judge in a New York City courtroom on several charges, including narco-terrorism conspiracy. Meanwhile, President Trump insisting that the U.S. will run the South American country temporarily and warning Maduro's vice president and acting leader to cooperate or, quote, pay a very big price.
We're going to run it, fix it. We'll have elections at the right time. If I didn't win this election, we would have been Venezuela on steroids.
Now questions about who is in charge and what happens next.
Who are those people who will be running the country specifically?
Well, it's not running, it's running policy. And the goal of the policy is to see changes in Venezuela that are beneficial to the United States, first and foremost, because that's who we work for, but also, we believe, beneficial for the people of Venezuela.
And across the U.S., celebration, but also cautious optimism from Venezuelans.
I feel really happy and grateful for the government here that is supporting all the Venezuelan people.
This is my country, of course, but right now I'm like, I don't know. At this point, I'm like very worried.
We have a lot to get to on this first Monday of the year. Thank you very much for being with us. Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Let's get right into it with our team of reporters and experts. They're helping us monitor developments from Washington to Caracas and what it all means here at home and all around the world. We're going to start things off with our senior national politics reporter, Jonathan Allen. So, John, let's just start by reminding viewers how this dramatic weekend unfolded, including the U.S. attack on Venezuela and Maduro's capture. We're going to dig into the details of the military operation in a moment, but just what are the headlines of the weekend and how this all unfolded early Saturday morning?
Sure, Joe. Going back, obviously, months now, there was a pressure campaign on Nicolás Maduro, the deposed now president of Venezuela, by the Trump administration, including the boat strikes that have gotten so much attention. And then President Trump says that he spoke to Maduro and said basically gave him one last chance to basically cede power, and he didn't do it. Then on Friday night and into Saturday morning, 150 U.S. planes and other support helped clear a path for special forces and law enforcement officers to go into Maduro's compound at about 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, Eastern time. And then they were able to capture, essentially without much of a firefight there. The U.S. cleared a path, of course, with munitions. President Trump suggested that electricity was cut to Caracas. They were able to capture Maduro and his wife and spirit them out. And then, by 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, they were in New York. There were some casualties. President Trump said they were fatalities only on the other side, including Cubans who were defending Maduro as part of Venezuela's cooperation with Cuba. But no American fatalities so far have been reported, a couple of casualties.
John, what can we expect from today's arraignment of Maduro and his wife? And tell us the Trump administration's argument here, what evidence they've provided to back up the drug-related charges they're alleging.
Yeah, Savannah, we'll see that arraignment at noon in Manhattan. This is the superseding indictment. Maduro had actually been indicted in 2020 on similar, conspiracy for narco-terrorism, similar charges, but not quite as much. We're, reading through the indictment. Basically, the government's going to allege that he sat effectively as a drug kingpin, or at least in partnership with the kingpins of several major international drug organizations, including the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, ELN in Colombia, and FARC in Venezuela itself. We'll obviously have to see the evidence at trial to get a better feel for specifically what that evidence is, but the government seems very confident they're going to be able to win a conviction here.
So, John, talk to us about the president's controversial plan to run Venezuela. As he puts it, that includes taking over the country's vast oil reserves. Again, right now, we don't have U.S. forces in the country. Maduro's VP is now going to be the acting president. Do we know what contact the administration has had with Delcy Rodriguez?
President Trump said he has spoken to Delcy Rodriguez. It seems very clear that the United States expects her to basically act in accordance with what the U.S. desires are. You heard Secretary Rubio on Meet the Press saying that the U.S. will be setting policy for Venezuela. So I think their hope is to use her as an agent to effectuate what the United States wants to have happen there. But beyond that, it's unclear. Secretary of State Rubio, Defense Secretary Hegseth, Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, all of them are part of a group in the United States trying to figure out exactly how to run Venezuela, as President Trump says. And, I think we'll have to wait a little bit to watch events unfold to get an understanding of what exactly that means, other than what has been very clear from the administration, which is that they want to open up Venezuela's vast oil holdings to American energy companies.
All right, John, thank you so much. Let's pick it up from there and dig deeper into this. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did shed some more light on what the next steps in Venezuela could look like yesterday, after President Trump announced Saturday the U.S. would run the country, but few details have been offered when pressed by reporters.
Yeah, in an interview on NBC's Meet the Press yesterday, Secretary Rubio discussed how he and other government agencies will be, quote, running policy to effect changes in Venezuela, changes that he said would benefit the U.S. and stabilize the region. Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker joins us now with more on that interview. Kristen, good morning.
Hello there, Joe and Savannah. This week on Meet the Press, I spoke with Secretary of State Marco Rubio about what President Trump meant when he said the U.S. will, quote, run Venezuela after American forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. Mr. Secretary, I think there's a lot of questions about who the point people are during this transition. President Trump said we're going to run the country. So is it you? Is it Secretary Hegseth? Who are those people who will be running the country specifically?
Well, it's not running, it's running policy. The policy with regards to this. We want Venezuela to move in a certain direction because not only do we think it's good for the people of Venezuela, it's in our national interest. It either touches on something that's a threat to our national security or touches on something that's either beneficial or harmful.
And are you involved in that transition,
and so obviously
Secretary?
I'm very involved in this. Well, of course. I mean, I think everyone knows I'm pretty involved on politics in this hemisphere. Obviously, as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, very involved in all these elements. The Department of War plays a very important role here, along with the Department of Justice, for example, because they're the ones that have to go to court. So this is a team effort by the entire national security apparatus of our country, but it is running this policy. And the goal of the policy is to see changes in Venezuela that are beneficial to the United States, first and foremost, because that's who we work for, but also, we believe, beneficial for the people of Venezuela, who have suffered tremendously. We want a better future for Venezuela, and we think a better future for the people of Venezuela also is stabilizing for the region and makes the neighborhood we live in a much better and safer place.
You can see my full interview and a whole lot more at MeetThePress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press right here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4 p.m.
All right, Kristen Welker, thank you.
We're continuing to learn new details about how all of this happened, the secret and highly risky operation to evict Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro by force.
Interviews with more than a dozen officials from the White House, the Trump administration, and Congress reveal the planning for Operation Absolute Resolve began as early as August. Elite troops spent months training for the raid, even using a replica of Maduro's presidential compound. And during that time, the U.S. was building up an armada of warships off Venezuela's coast as a CIA team secretly entered the country. A week ago, President Trump says he gave Maduro one last chance to step down, telling him to surrender in a private phone call. The president says Maduro came close to giving in, but ultimately took the gamble of his life by staying put, clearing the way for this military operation, which was detailed over the weekend by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
This was an audacious operation that only the United States could do. It required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. An extraction so precise it involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere in close coordination after months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets. In early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise.
NBC News military analyst and former Pentagon spokesperson Colonel Steve Warren joins us now with more on this. Colonel, good morning. Thanks very much for your time. So, I mean, based on everything that we just heard there, those details, some of what Joe laid out about this Operation Absolute Resolve, tell us just how complex you believe it was to execute this.
Good morning, Savannah. I think this is probably the complexity of this operation rivals or even exceeds many of the most notable operations we've seen in recent years, including the B-2 stealth bombing raid in Iran and even the assault and raid that killed Osama bin Laden. This is it's almost like a symphony of bringing together intelligence, operational planning, and then operational execution from really almost globally, including everything from satellites to cyber attacks potentially that turned out the lights in parts of Caracas before this operation even took place, all the way down to the commandos on the ground who in the very last moments of this operation were no longer able to rely on the super high technology equipment that we have, but then it was just grit and courage and precision and speed that allowed them to penetrate into the presidential compound, eliminate any resistance that appears now to be potentially Cuban security that was providing that close-in security for Maduro, and then exfiltrate. So I think everyone from the intelligence community to the military, all the men and women who executed this operation have quite a lot to be proud of today.
Colonel, just looking at the timeline here, we know U.S. service members reached Maduro's compound in Caracas at 1 in the morning Saturday. By 3:30 a.m., they were safely out of the country. We know Venezuela's defense minister said a large part of Maduro's security team was killed in the raid. No U.S. forces were killed. There were some injuries. We're told one aircraft was hit but kept flying. Are you surprised at all that they did not face more resistance?
Yeah, it's you know, I think there's a combination of reasons why they didn't. In every military operation, the number one thing we think about is how do we suppress any potential resistance. So clearly, again, months of planning, exceptional precise execution to suppress the resistance before those helicopters even got over land, I think was the key to this. So, you know, it's surprising, but it's not unusual, if that makes any sense, right? This was the reason there was so little resistance is because of the exceptional planning and the extraordinary execution that went into all of this. Now, once you get on the ground, and it's actual commandos holding rifles, moving through a building and moving through corridors, it's not clear to me exactly how much resistance they received. You know, we know that some of our troops were injured. We know that many, possibly we heard from the Cubans, I think yesterday, that said 30 Cuban officers or 30 Cuban personnel were killed. So this could be the close-in security. So they may have received quite a bit of what we would call close quarters combat resistance. But as far as larger resistance, it's the exceptional work of everything from our Space Force to our Cyber Force to the great intelligence community that discovered all of this.
Colonel, we've been talking so far just about the questions in terms of how Venezuela will be led during this period. There's also questions, though, militarily moving forward, because President Trump told reporters the U.S. is ready to stage a second, larger attack if needed. Also, we heard him not ruling out the possibility of putting U.S. troops on the ground in Venezuela. And then there's also the tension that we're seeing, this friction between Trump and the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez. She said Maduro is still the head of Venezuela's government. She also said the country is ready to defend its natural resources. So, I mean, do you think that means that we're close to seeing another military confrontation here? Are you concerned about that?
Well, it's certainly concerning. You know, we still have more than 15,000 troops arrayed in the region. We've got a dozen warships, aircraft, et cetera. So we have quite a large force arrayed in the area. This isn't a large enough force to invade a nation the size of Venezuela, but it's certainly a large enough force to inflict some damage to Venezuela. So I think ultimately what's going to drive the next U.S. steps are a combination of what Delcy Rodriguez ultimately decides to do. But also let's not discount the Venezuelan military. More than 120,000 troops in their Army, Navy, and Air Force. They do not always align with the government, unlike, in the United States of America, where the troops follow the president's orders. That's not always the case in Venezuela. So it remains to be seen. Ultimately, if the military, the Venezuelan military and the Venezuelan, what remains of the Venezuelan government fall in line and conduct themselves right, then I think we can keep our troops safe. Otherwise, there may be a requirement to move in.
Colonel Steve Warren, thank you very much. We appreciate your expertise this morning very much. Well, there are growing questions around how this operation in Venezuela could impact the future of geopolitics and the global economy.
Some American adversaries like China, Russia, and Iran have condemned the Trump administration for these attacks.
Let's bring in Hagar Shamali for more on the geopolitical impact of this U.S. intervention in Venezuela. She's the host of Oh My World on YouTube and also the former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the UN and former National Security Council Director for Syria and Lebanon. Hagar, good morning. Thanks as always for joining us. So let's broaden this out and talk about potential activities in other countries, or even, like we just mentioned, there potential further military intervention in Venezuela. One concern has been Greenland. We've heard the president talk about taking over Greenland in the past, and then we actually also just saw the wife of Trump aide Stephen Miller posting an image. It shows, here it is on your screen, the American flag like superimposed over a map of Greenland, and with the word there just typed soon. In response yesterday, Denmark's prime minister issued a statement saying that it makes really no sense for the U.S. to talk about needing to take over Greenland, referencing this historically close nature between the U.S. and Denmark and therefore Greenland. You can see that statement on your screen. But this all carries a little more weight after what's happened in Venezuela, right?
Yes. Well, I'm so glad you're asking about broadening out, because the reason Greenland makes sense here, and the reason in this context in particular, is that this whole effort isn't about the oil. It's not even about the drugs. It's about geopolitical power and competition, because Maduro had allowed Venezuela to be used as a satellite for all of its, as I call it, the club of baddies, meaning the Chinese Communist Party, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Putin, Hezbollah, Cuba. And it is in our hemisphere. That is something we sustain government, by the way. That's what we call it, the Western Hemisphere. That's in our backyard. You don't want, when you have a growth in competition like this, where you're seeing dictatorship and human rights abuse around the world on the rise, you don't want them playing in your backyard or benefiting, by the way, from Venezuelan oil. That's why the oil part comes up. Not because we need it, but because we don't want these nefarious actors controlling it or benefiting from it. And Greenland plays a role in that as well. That's why it's kind of connected. That's why you see that being mentioned, because Greenland has access to, has many rare earth minerals, and has waterways that we know Russia and China are using. And that's why Trump is turning his focus to that. Now, does that mean I think that he's going to take over or try to invade Greenland? I can't say. I don't know. I wouldn't speculate on that. I will say that he's posturing because he's trying to highlight this threat to Denmark and to the European neighbors, saying he's not going to allow these nefarious actors that we know are working against us and we know are competing to use Greenland and those waterways or potentially rare earth minerals to benefit their own power or to be used against us. That's what this is ultimately about.
Hagar, we know that Maduro actually met with China's special envoy just hours before the U.S. launched this operation to capture him. What message does this all send to U.S. adversaries like Russia, China, and Iran about the Western Hemisphere? And also, just when we think of China, we wonder, does China see this as perhaps a green light to go into Taiwan now?
Yeah, sure. So a couple things there. First is that you're going to definitely have weaker adversaries like the Iranian regime, certainly the leader of Cuba, Putin for sure, shaking their boots a bit, wondering, oh my God, are we next? What is the red line? And we know this with the administration is that they deliberately obfuscate. They are never clear in what they say they're going to do. And that works well with an adversary, because then the adversary sits on its heels and figures, okay, maybe I won't behave as badly. But when you have an adversary and competitor like China, which has a military that does rival ours, where it is a genuine competitor, then you must wonder that Chairman Xi must be thinking thinking, well, if I went into Taiwan the way the United States did, then maybe nobody would go after me because I'm also strong. And so I think it depends on the adversary. Some are going to be worried, some are going to feel emboldened, but all that, by the way, boils down to the fact of this, and I hate to get really nerdy here, but I'm going to, is you have the international world order, the institutions that were created after World War II to prevent such behavior do not work. They're not working. That's why Putin was able to lop off a piece of his neighbor's land and then invade it and still sit on the UN Security Council. And for Trump and the way this views, he views it as taking matters into his own hands. He's thinking, all right, you know what? We've got this rise of dictatorship. We've got a nefarious actor behind our borders, sending drugs, behaving badly, and allowing this club of baddies to grow. We're going to take it into our own hands. And that, while that could work for the United States, and I do have hope that it will, it might not work so well for other adversaries who might behave the same way.
Hagar, what can we learn from history here? Any lessons to be learned from previous American attempts at regime change in other places, maybe like the Middle East?
Well, I'm loath to compare it to the Middle East because the Middle East is such a different environment. Venezuela, and I know the opposition leaders in Venezuela, by the way, very well. I work with them through the Human Rights Foundation. They are very unified. They're very coordinated. For example, we know that Maria Corina Machado and her colleague Edmundo Gonzalez won the election. And Maduro stole the election twice. We know that if there were a free and fair election today, that they would win. And so, when you're talking about democracy and prosperity, this is in Venezuela's recent history. It's Chavez and Maduro who brought it down. So Venezuelans know what a democracy looks like and how it should function. They know what it's like to have a capitalist society. And these are things that Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez have promised. The Middle East is totally different, so it's hard to compare. So while the U.S. has not necessarily done regime change very well, I wouldn't compare there. I would compare to the abduction of Noriega in Panama by George Bush Sr. And that, while it was a little bit of a rocky road, it did work out. Panama did return to democracy and prosperity.
Hagar Shamali, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Let's stay with international reaction to this operation in Venezuela. Some American adversaries like China, as we mentioned, are calling it a violation of international law.
Yes, some Venezuelans are praising President Trump's actions, while some neighboring countries like Colombia have expressed concerns about an influx of refugees and an increase in political violence.
NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has made his way to Colombia near the Venezuelan border. Gabe, good morning. So we know the UN Security Council is set to meet today to discuss what happened in Venezuela, the capture of Nicolás Maduro. We know major world leaders, especially in the West, have sort of cautiously towed the line with their reactions, condemning the Maduro regime, but saying, hey, it's important to follow international law. So what can we actually expect from this meeting today?
Hi there. Good morning, Joe and Savannah. Yes, Venezuela formally asked for this meeting of the UN Security Council. And yes, we're expecting it later this morning. Look, the UN Secretary General has already released a statement saying he was deeply alarmed by what happened in Venezuela and that it sets an alarming precedent. And you're right, several of America's adversaries have already condemned what happened, including Iran, Russia. China is asking for Nicolás Maduro to be freed immediately. And several Latin American countries, including Colombia and Mexico, have issued a joint statement condemning the U.S. actions in Venezuela. Over the weekend, we also saw a rally in Cuba where that country's president condemned the action. Still, the Trump administration does not really seem to care what the UN says and what some of these leaders say. They point to what they view as a necessary mission to capture Nicolás Maduro. Joe.
Gabe, there's a lot of uncertainty in several Caribbean and South American countries this morning, places like where you are, Colombia, Venezuela's western neighbor. When talking to reporters on Air Force One last night, President Trump seemed to threaten Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, calling him a, quote, sick man who likes to make cocaine. How are officials and the people in Colombia responding to comments like those and to what we saw on the ground in Venezuela?
Look, Colombia is out with a statement saying that the president's comments and actions violate the norms of international law. And certainly there is a lot of pushback from Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, who has repeatedly denied that he or his government is involved in drug trafficking. But that is something that President Trump has been railing against for quite some time, slamming Colombia's president and appearing threatened, really, yes, threatening that he could be next. It's very interesting. I'm here at the border with Venezuela, Joe and Savannah, and behind me, over my shoulder, you see those tanks that have been set up. That's the Colombian military. There's ramped up security here at the border because this government fears that there could be a renewed migrant influx into Colombia. Some 8 million people, displaced Venezuelans, have left the country over the last 12 years. About 3 million or so of them, according to the UN, have ended up here in Colombia. And there is a concern that there could be more. In addition to that, this city, Cucuta, where I'm at, is known for its cartel violence, and the ELN, one of the known drug trafficking organizations that was actually mentioned in the indictment against Maduro, it controls much of the border, and the Colombian government also has concern that there could be a rise in cartel violence as this whole situation unfolds. Johnson.
Gabe, just talking to people since you've been on the ground there in Colombia, what are you hearing? What is the mood?
Well, we actually have been in Bogota, where it's a very complicated reaction here. We talked to some Venezuelan refugees that had settled in Colombia. We talked to them at a rally in Bogota. It was pro-U.S. They were grateful for what President Trump and his administration did in Venezuela. So there's certainly some of that. Here in the border region, we spoke last night when we arrived with some Venezuelans that were actually crossing into Colombia. And what I can say is that there is a profound sense of uncertainty here. They do not know what is next. They do not know what the future of Venezuela holds. Just a few feet from where I'm standing, we ran across a family, a Venezuelan family that was crossing over the border to say goodbye to one of their family members who was leaving Venezuela, perhaps for good, trying to look for work, but he didn't know if he'd be able to come back. So a sense of uncertainty and, frankly, heartbreak for some of those that don't know what the future holds. But then again, for others who feel that the Maduro regime needed to fall, they think that this is a step in the right direction. So very mixed reactions here in the region, Johnson.
All right. Gabe Gutierrez in Colombia. Gabe, thank you so much.
Well, in Venezuela, the country is set to swear in its new president, Delcy Rodriguez.
She was Maduro's vice president when he was leader.
Let's bring in Ana Vanessa Herrero. She's a freelance journalist based out of Venezuela. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So talk to us about Venezuela's new president, how she's responded to President Trump's threat that she could, quote, pay a bigger price than Maduro if she doesn't cooperate with the U.S.
Well, for sure, it was an immediate change of tone right there after those words from Donald Trump. Delcy Rodriguez, who has been known for being a fierce critic of not only the U.S. policies against South America, but against Donald Trump himself. She had suddenly a change of heart and asked and invited Donald Trump and the U.S. government to work together in a joint agenda. Now, how is this joint agenda going to translate in the future? Are we going to see new laws, for example, in the oil industry that would benefit the U.S.? Are we going to see this as a reestablishment of diplomatic relations between Venezuela and the U.S.? We really don't know. It's too soon to tell. But definitely, if, someone told me a week ago, Delcy Rodriguez is going to work, or at least offer to work hand in hand with Donald Trump, I would have said, impossible. But after the recent events, I think, Venezuela keeps surprising all of us.
How are Venezuelans reacting to President Trump's pledge to run the country and to take over its oil reserves? Is that something you see people in the country readily willing to accept?
So the situation among Venezuelans that I've talked to, it's a little bit mixed. We are seeing still Venezuelans in a state of shock. So the conversation is not, at least not until the Sunday, it wasn't revolving around if who's going to run the country, who's going to be next, if there are going to be elections or not, which are huge questions for the international community and people abroad. But for Venezuelans, the shock is still there. But with some people that I talked to that actually address this issue, it's a little bit of both sides. Some people told me that they were more than happy to let the United States run things for a while, so that they could see some kind of stability. And then the other side, I spoke to this woman that said that she was perfectly fine with what happened to Nicolás Maduro, but she draw the line right there on when another president from another country said that he was going to be in charge of her country. So she said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she said that, you know, we need elections and we need to decide who is going to run our country because, and this is a straight quote that I, you know, stuck with me, I don't go to his country to say who's next and who's in line.
And Anna, quickly, also just stepping back, how are Venezuelan people viewing the capture of Maduro generally? What are you hearing?
Well, Maduro no doubt had followers, and those followers were seen on the streets this weekend to reject and to ask the government of President Donald Trump to return Nicolás Maduro to Venezuela. But on the other side, a lot of people are celebrating, they're joyful, hopeful, but we're not seeing that translated into a street mood because people are know very well that if they do, they might face repression, jail, and even death, as they have in the past. So the celebrations we're seeing are very close, at home, private, some messages over social media and private messages shared here and there. But definitely what is true for everyone, followers and those who don't approve of Nicolás Maduro, is that everything is very uncertain, and the anxiety, you can feel the anxiety on the streets.
Ana Vanessa Herrero, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We're going to have much more on this breaking news on this hour of Morning News Now. Later on, new questions about what happens to Venezuela's vast oil reserves, what it could mean for us here at home.
And at first, after the break, we'll take a closer look at the charges against Maduro and his wife as they prepare to face a judge later today. We will be right back.
Welcome back. You're looking at live pictures right now. Maduro is currently being loaded into an armored truck there by federal forces, where he will then be taken for his first court appearance, which is expected to happen around noon Eastern time later today. That's a live picture right now of federal authorities loading Maduro into that armored truck. As we've been discussing, later today, he and his wife expected to make their first U.S. appearance here in Manhattan. Maduro is facing serious charges, including narco-terrorism conspiracy.
4 other senior Venezuelan officials, including Maduro's son, are also named in the indictment. They are accused of working with Maduro to support international drug trafficking organizations.
We'll keep an eye on this right now and bring in NBC News correspondent Sam Brock, who's at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, where Maduro is about to be heading to. Sam, good morning. Recap for us. What exactly is the government alleging here? What are the charges Maduro's facing?
Yeah, Joe, Savannah, good morning. Just to set the scene here first, countless cameras, as you would imagine, huge police presence. And as you were just describing, Joe, a second ago, we watched within the last 15 or 20 minutes as Nicolás Maduro, the deposed former leader of Venezuela, and his wife, Cilia Flores, were taken from an armored car to another vehicle where they were transported to a helipad, flown by helicopter to the Wall Street helipad, and now we're in the process of being taken here to the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. The expectation, it's going to take several hours to process them. In terms of the charges that Maduro is facing, so first of all, it's Maduro, Cilia Flores, his son, and 3 other top lieutenants, although we believe it is just going to be Maduro and his wife in court today. Not exactly clear the status of the other people that were indicted. But as far as the charges that they're facing, Joe, you mentioned narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy. The indictment lays out in very clear terms over 20 some odd pages how Maduro had spent years coordinating with some of the most notorious drug cartels in the world, from Tren de Aragua in Venezuela to the Sinaloa cartel, effectively subverting legitimate political and military institutions for drug trafficking. The indictment lays out, in its own words, a relentless campaign of distributing cocaine to the United States, which led to the death of Americans, as you're looking right now at live images of that truck, that armored car, transporting Maduro right now to the federal courthouse where we are standing. So this could all be transpiring, really, in terms of getting him to the location to start the processing, really within the next several minutes, you would imagine. But those are the charges that they're facing, and the narco-terrorism, of course, is the biggest umbrella charge. There's weapons-related charges as well, but obviously all of it very serious, guys.
Yeah, quick drive. Again, live pictures on your screen right now in a vehicle and about in the middle of that convoy there, Maduro traveling from what Sam pointed out is the Wall Street helipad that's right down in Lower Manhattan, and really just quite a brief drive to where you are, Sam, at the federal courthouse, where we'll see him shortly. What do we expect in court today? Do Maduro and his wife have an attorney?
Yes. So that is one of the big questions going into this, right? First of all, the expectation is it's going to be an arraignment. They're not appearing before a magistrate. They are appearing before a senior U.S. District Court judge. So it's the initial appearance, probably an arraignment where they'll be asked to plead. But the question about whether or not they're going to have representation and who that might be is very much open-ended, because with respect to Maduro, he's been under U.S. sanctions, guys. He's had assets frozen. It's not even clear whether or not he can hire an American law firm. It might be a court-assigned attorney. If it is, Maduro or Celia Flores, his wife, they may request consultation with the attorneys before they actually enter a plea. So this could be 10 minutes. It could be an hour. Typically, you know, in arraignments like this, you're not only going to have a brief recap of the charges, but also the judge would ask how long representation needs to prepare for trial. No doubt this is something that's going to take a year or longer, years potentially. There will certainly be motions filed, whoever ultimately represents Maduro, on the basis that the legality of his capture should be challenged because it violated international law. These are all things that are going to play out in the weeks to come. But right now, will there be a plea? Who will his attorney or representation consist of? Those are the things we're going to be watching out for in a matter of hours, as the arraignment is expected to take place at noon today.
Obviously, we're keeping a close eye on Maduro right now as he makes his way to the courthouse. But as you mentioned, Sam, moments ago, he and his wife are not the only ones listed in the indictment. You also mentioned his son, 3 other lieutenants. I know we don't know much, but what are we learning about their status when it comes to this criminal case?
Sure. So with respect to his wife, she was not listed, Joe, in the superseding indictment that dates back to 2020. This latest indictment, which came, again, from a federal grand jury in New York, does include Celia Flores. She is charged in the cocaine importation conspiracy side of it, not the narco-terrorism side. But, of course, the latest indictment has been updated with more criminal activity in recent years. Similar charges for his son, for the other 3 lieutenants as well, all of it related to the trafficking of drugs and coordination with these cartels and narco-terrorist organizations that we were just talking about, in addition to possession of weapons or conspiracy to possess weapons. There's a whole bunch of layers to the indictment, but the top line certainly are Maduro and his wife.
Again, about to arrive where you are at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Sam, walk us through a little bit about what we expect today in terms of how long something like this is going to take. What happens after for Maduro and his wife, where they'll head, where they're going to be continuing to be held?
It's a great question. This could be a very sort of quick, perfunctory hearing, although one would imagine, given the complexity that's involved here, it may not be. Again, wow, just a surreal scene as you're watching his armored car right now and a police escort arrive at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, literally as we are talking right now. Savannah, to your question in terms of where Maduro and his wife have been detained, it's MDC, it's the Metropolitan Detention Center that's located in Brooklyn. It's only about a 15 or 20-minute drive from where we are in Lower Manhattan. This is the same facility where Luigi Mangione is currently being detained as he awaits trial. Sean Diddy Combs, Ghislaine Maxwell, several other high-profile defendants have also been there. It's frankly a notorious institution in the sense that there have been so many accounts of violence there, of inhumane conditions. That's where Maduro is and where Celia Flores have been detained in these early hours here. And again, you are watching in real time right now as the armored truck that has both of them inside is now preparing to take them from the truck inside the building. We're going to lose our vision here any second now, and to process those two. And that's expected to take several hours. There's no indication that NBC News has at this point that the other members of that indictment, other people indicted, are actually going to be in court today. That also is one of the things we're waiting to get more information on from our sources, guys.
Sam, we know momentarily we may lose you as you continue to do your reporting there for us, but we are going to ask you to stand by just since you are right outside the building where we just saw them arrive, sort of on the other side of it. And thank you very much for your reporting. We want to bring in Danny Ceballos because we've been reporting that several nations, including China, have questioned the legality of the U.S. taking Maduro into custody. So we've got our legal analyst, Danny Zavelos, on set with more on this. Danny, so let's start the big, broad question. The U.S. having the legal authority to indict and then bring the leader of another country into the U.S.
The shorter answer is we shall see. But there actually is quite a bit of precedent, maybe not exactly for this. And I'll give you an example. As a criminal defense attorney, I've actually handled cases in which our government exercises considerable what's called extraterritorial jurisdiction. As we speak, our Coast Guard is probably thousands of miles away in open waters, and they frequently board and arrest ships with people who are nationals of another country and bring them back to the U.S. to face drug trafficking charges. So, in a sense, we've been projecting extraterritorial jurisdiction for some time. When it comes to a presumptive leader of another country, we do have some precedent for that in the form of 1989 and Manuel Noriega. And in that case, similarly, we brought a leader back and brought him to face charges. One thing that the courts suggest and the government believes is that even if you apprehend someone in violation of international law, that does not affect the legality of the prosecution back here in the U.S.
Hagar mentioned just moments ago that perhaps Noriega in Panama is the best historical comparison we got. Remind us what happened there. What are the similarities and differences so far between what happened then and what's happening now with Maduro?
Exactly, Joe. There are similarities and there are differences, as is the case with every precedent. This is what lawyers do. One side cites precedent and says it's exactly the same, and the other side says not so fast. There are differences. So here are the differences. In 1989, Manuel Noriega in Panama, the Panamanian Assembly had declared war against the United States. That's not the situation here in Venezuela. Also, in Panama, a U.S. Marine had been killed by Panamanian authorities or people acting under the rule of Noriega. Now, you could argue, and I expect the government's going to argue, that one Marine compared to the thousands upon thousands that have been hurt by fentanyl, and that's what Maduro is indicted for here, drug trafficking. That is a similar, if not greater, harm. So that's going to be an argument you can guarantee you're going to hear from the government. And then maybe the most important point is this. The U.S. government does not consider Maduro to be the leader, and I'm using air quotes, of Venezuela. They believe that he unlawfully seized power. So look for them to take that position, that this is just as if we had arrested some foreign national on an unflagged boat in open seas. And I'm kind of being glib here, but they will not think of him as a leader of the government when justifying this extraterritorial apprehension.
Another thing we've been hearing, Danny, in regards to the argument that the United States will have is this idea of self-defense. How does that work?
That is a very clever use of the magic words that will get the government to legal authority to project their power abroad, grab someone in another country and bring them back. There are lines of cases that deal with things like self-defense of the country and also defense of law enforcement in carrying out their law enforcement activities. So look for the government to use these magic words frequently because they implicate a number of different legal doctrines that they hope will give the government authority. And make no mistake about it, the defendants are going to challenge this apprehension. This will be litigated and it might go to the Supreme Court, which is why at the beginning when I said we shall see is that this is such a novel area of the law that we're actually going to get an answer to this, presumably, and likely from the Supreme Court.
I mean, based on what we've seen so far, with all the different factors, the international rules, things like that, how complex is this case? Is this something that could drag on for years and years and years because every decision that needs to be appealed and we need to wait for the Supreme Court to decide on it? Or is there something rather straightforward about the charges?
Yeah, here's the interesting thing. The actual charges themselves are just narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and even machine gun charges, firearms offenses. These are the same things you might see a drug kingpin in Minnesota, North Carolina, anywhere here in the U.S. charged with. So the actual trial and the substantive charges may not be as complex as we might expect. What will be exceedingly complex is whether or not the apprehension of Maduro and his wife abroad with the use of U.S. military was lawful and how those laws interplay, our domestic laws interplay with the UN Charter and the prohibition against exactly this kind of thing. And we shall find out what the legal answer to that very complex question is before the relatively less complex issue of the trial on drug and firearms offenses.
Danny Savallo, so many questions. Thank you very much for helping us walk through some of it. Well, President Trump greenlit this military operation without getting approval from Congress, which was still in recess during the holidays.
Now leaders from both sides are demanding answers as they return to Washington today.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona joins us with more on the reactions to this military action in Venezuela from Congress. Mel, good morning. Good to have you with us. So there is a meeting scheduled for later today with what's called the Congressional Gang of Eight. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other Trump administration officials, they're expected to be there to talk about this operation. What do we think we're going to learn from that meeting?
Well, certainly there's a lot of questions from both parties here. Top of mind for Democrats is whether this operation was legal and why Congress was neither notified or given the opportunity to give their stamp of approval. Then there's the forward-looking questions. Trump has said that the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. So what role is the United States going to play in the transition? Does that mean boots on the ground? And if so, how many boots on the ground and for how long? And finally, we're also expecting that Trump officials may get pressed on some of their past statements in classified briefings about Venezuela, where they assured lawmakers that regime change was not the endgame, was not the goal. Clearly, that is not the case. So we'll see whether lawmakers get some satisfactory answers in this classified setting today. But again, this is only a select group of lawmakers getting this briefing tonight. The question is whether the full Congress will get a briefing at some point this week as well.
So, Mel, we know this operation has largely been well received by Republican leaders, many of them praising the Trump administration for, they say, protecting American interests. But we have seen some others, like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, argue it doesn't put America's best interests first. In other words, it doesn't jive with the America First policy. Of course, she's done tomorrow. What all are we hearing here?
That's exactly right. For the most part, Republicans have been very supportive and praising President Trump for the capture of Maduro, with Trump officials like Secretary Rubio explaining to members in phone calls and in media interviews why they did not notify Congress and why did they not seek approval from Congress prior to this mission. But some Republicans, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, not exactly buying that argument. Just watch.
This was not an action that required congressional approval. In fact, it couldn't require congressional approval because this was not an invasion.
If this was really about narco-terrorists and about protecting Americans from cartels and drugs being brought into America, the Trump administration would be attacking the Mexican cartels. Now, I am not defending Maduro, and of course, I'm happy for the people of Venezuela to be liberated.
Now, of course, as you mentioned, Marjorie Taylor Greene no longer going to be a member of Congress after today. She is resigning, and she certainly is in the minority here when it comes to Republican voices. But she does reflect a serious point, which is that Trump ran on the idea of ending forever war. So this could be a split, another split in the MAGA movement.
And let's talk about the other side of this, Mel. Many Democrats have argued that the operation is illegal. It was dangerous. What are we hearing from some top leaders?
Yeah, Democrats certainly do not believe this operation was legal, and they are furious that even the Gang of Eight, which are the top leaders in Congress who are often trusted with the nation's most sensitive secrets, were completely left in the dark about this operation. Still, to this moment, have not been briefed or received information from the Trump administration. Just listen to Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader.
There's been no evidence that the administration has presented to justify the actions that were taken in terms of there being an imminent threat to the health, the safety, the well-being, the national security of the American people. This was not simply a counter-narcotics operation. It was an act of war.
Now, over in the Senate, Democrats are planning to force a vote this week on the floor on a resolution that would essentially block the Trump administration from further action in Venezuela without congressional approval. However, given that there are only a few Republicans expected to support that measure, we don't think it's actually going to pass. Guys.
All right, Mel, thank you very much.
After capturing Venezuela's leader, President Trump is setting his sights on the country's vast oil reserves, which are the largest in the world.
Mr. Trump laid out his vision for American companies to take over the country's oil industry. Take a listen.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
For more on this, let's bring in the head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy, Patrick DeHaan. Patrick, good to have you with us. So first of all, just a little oil 101 here. Talk to us about the state of Venezuela's oil industry, how it was operating before everything unfolded Saturday morning, and just how was it selling its crude oil globally?
Yeah, good morning, Joe and Savannah. A lot of this, as the president has said, Venezuela's oil output is just a fraction of what it has been in decades past. Now, a lot of that was because of U.S. sanctions and oil companies that essentially had been nationalized under Hugo Chavez, and Maduro continued that. U.S. companies that had assets taken. Chevron, the only remaining U.S. operation in Venezuela, had gotten permission to operate through the sanctions. So that's the only U.S. oil company down there. But after decades of neglect, it would likely take tens of billions of dollars of investment, to the president's point, to get oil output increased in Venezuela. Now, as we navigate this regime shift, the biggest question for these oil companies still is, will there be friendliness to the oil sector? Will there be pro-growth policies? What will that look like? Keep in mind, it will take tens of billions of dollars just to get additional oil to begin to start flowing. There's still a lot of risks and uncertainty with who the next leader of Venezuela may be, and oil companies might be a little reluctant at the onset, especially in this era of lower oil prices. Oil prices recently touching multi-year lows. That's a risky investment for any company to produce oil at lower oil prices, at such lofty investments needed to boost this output.
So what kind of impact is what happened in Venezuela having on oil prices right now?
Well, oil prices last night after opening, they fell a little bit, about a 0.5 percentage point. This morning, though, oil prices bouncing back up to the upside. Keep in mind, there is now short-term risk in Venezuela. There could be loyalists to the regime that could further damage infrastructure. Oil prices up modestly, but so far, gasoline prices still doing their seasonal trends. And by the way, in the weeks ahead, I don't expect this to really impact gas prices at all. Gas prices have been trending lower. That will likely reverse once we get to mid to late February, as that seasonality starts to look towards summer.
So that's your short-term sort of analysis here. In the long term, do we have an idea of what this could mean for the American consumer? I mean, I guess it depends on how the different scenarios unfold, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. There's a wide range of possible scenarios. Now, in the long run, I think relative stability and additional oil from Venezuela could lead to less volatility when it comes to oil. That certainly could be good news for U.S. consumers, global consumers as well, is that adding additional oil from Venezuela to the world oil supply could stabilize prices. But keep in mind, that could be a long time coming. It could take many years to boost Venezuela's oil output back to its peak. Venezuela today producing less than 500,000 barrels of oil per day. Keep in mind, at their peak, they were close to producing 3.5 to 4 million barrels.
All right, Patrick DeHaan, good to have you with us and tap into your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, we are also following other breaking news here on Morning News Now.
Yeah, the Secret Service says one man is in custody after what it's calling a security incident at the home of Vice President J.D. Vance. What we're learning right after the break.
We are back with more breaking news this morning. This, though, from here at home. The Secret Service is confirming one person is in custody after a security incident at the home of Vice President J.D. Vance.
The break-in at the VP's Cincinnati home happened overnight. The Secret Service says an adult man was taken into custody for causing property damage. That includes breaking windows on the exterior of the personal residence. Both the Secret Service and Vice President Vance's office confirm he and his family were not home at the time of the incident. Press Secretary Taylor Van Kirk says, quote, the VP and family were already back in D.C. when this occurred. Officials have finished identifying all the victims who died in that deadly fire at a New Year's party in Switzerland last week. The nationalities and ages of the victims were released yesterday, but not their names. Officials now say a number of teenagers were among the 40 people who died, including some as young as 14 years old. Authorities believe the fire broke out at a bar located in the Swiss Alps when sparklers on top of champagne bottles ignited the soundproof lining on the ceiling. A criminal investigation is now underway into the bar's managers.
And closer to home, investigators in Ohio are on the hunt for the person who killed a Columbus area dentist and his wife. Spencer and Monique Tapie were found dead in their bedroom on Tuesday morning after several 911 calls from friends and colleagues who were concerned Spencer had not shown up for work. Their 2 children, just 1 and 4 years old, were found safe in a separate room. Columbus police said they are treating the case as a homicide. Officials found 3 empty gun casings at the scene, but have not publicly named any suspects. In a Facebook post, the Columbus police asked the public to submit any suspicious videos or photos to help with their investigation.
Concerns are growing about a serious spike in flu cases as millions of Americans head back to school and to work this week. The holidays now in the rearview mirror. The CDC says 29 states are now seeing high or very high flu-like activity. And across the U.S., more than 80,000 people have been hospitalized amid this brutal flu season. This year, the virus is taking off faster than usual because of a mutated variant, which some have dubbed the super flu. Doctors say infants and young children through age 4 have been among those hit hardest, but the worst could be yet to come. This rise in cases is not expected to level off until at least the end of January. Doctors say it is still not too late to get that flu shot. That's going to do it for this very busy hour of Morning News Now.
Yeah, big way to kick off the year. The news continues right now. Stay with us.
Right now on Morning News Now, Venezuela takeover. President Trump doubling down on his plans for Venezuela's future, days after U.S. troops captured the country's leader and his wife. Returning to the White House overnight, President Trump had this to say about who was running the South American country.
We're dealing with the people. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
Because we're in charge.
As for what that would look like, the president says he plans to send American oil companies to repair the country's infrastructure and tap into their oil reserves. But as President Trump asserts the U.S. will run the country, members of his cabinet are offering this qualifier.
Who are those people who will be running the country specifically?
Well, it's not running, it's running policy. The policy with regards to this. We want Venezuela to move in a certain direction because not only do we think it's good for the people of Venezuela, it's in our national interest.
Here in New York City, Nicolás Maduro and his wife set to make their first U.S. court appearance in just a few hours. Earlier this morning, Maduro could be seen making his way to court in Lower Manhattan in this armored vehicle. He and his wife are facing several federal charges, including narco-terrorism and weapons-related charges. This comes as we're learning more about that high-stakes mission to capture them that unfolded early Saturday. Also learning where things stand now on the ground in Venezuela. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. There is a lot to get to on this first Monday of 2026. Thank you for joining us. We've got a team of experts and correspondents here to break it all down for us. We are going to start things off with NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Peter Alexander for the very latest out of Venezuela and Washington, D.C. Peter, good morning.
Good morning to you. That stunning surprise raid may prove to be the easy part. Now President Trump faces a massive new challenge, transforming Venezuela, which he says is a broken country, into a stable, functioning one. Overnight, repeating his assertion that the U.S. is in charge, while noting among his immediate priorities there, sending in American oil companies to take over Venezuela's oil supply and repair the infrastructure. Overnight, President Trump returning to the White House, detailing his plans for the future of Venezuela aboard Air Force One.
We're going to run everything.
Venezuela's ousted leader, Nicolás Maduro, who will appear in federal court today, seen arriving in the U.S. and accompanied by agents in New York. His wife, Celia Flores, one of Maduro's key advisors, is also in custody. Now, questions about how involved America will be as the country moves forward. The president initially saying this on Saturday.
We're going to run the country.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio responding on Meet the Press Sunday.
Who are those people who will be running the country specifically?
Well, it's not running, it's running policy.
But Sunday night, the president doubled down.
We're going to run it, fix it. We'll have elections at the right time.
And asked who's in charge.
I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
Because we're in charge.
And on whether American troops will be on the ground in Venezuela.
Depends on what happens.
The president also delivering a warning to Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, a Maduro loyalist, if she does not meet demands for what he called total access.
I just say that she will face a situation probably worse than Maduro, because, you know, Maduro gave up immediately.
Rodriguez, who initially denounced Maduro's capture as an illegal kidnapping, striking a more diplomatic tone Sunday night, saying our people and our region deserve peace and dialogue, not war. It comes as we learn new details about the highly coordinated mission in Venezuela to capture Maduro, including strikes and 150 American aircraft launched from 20 bases. A secret CIA team operated in the country since August using drones, and a person inside Maduro's inner circle, according to a source with knowledge of the matter, to develop a picture of his daily routine. The military used that intelligence to build a replica of Maduro's safe house for training. These new images reveal the damage inflicted by the U.S. military strikes that the Pentagon says were necessary to clear the way for its forces. A senior White House official tells NBC News that Maduro's, quote, overt arrogance, including his rejection of multiple offers to surrender and regular public dancing, helped persuade some within the president's team that Maduro was defiant and would not leave on his own. That senior White House official responding to the president's remarks about running Venezuela, saying the U.S. will exert its power in the country by control of Venezuela's oil, telling me the U.S. will keep its restrictions on Venezuela's oil in place for maximum leverage. Back to you.
All right, Peter, thank you.
Nicolás Maduro and his wife just arrived at the federal courthouse in Manhattan hours ahead of their first appearance later today. The couple was flown by helicopter to an armored car, which then drove them the rest of the way.
Maduro is facing narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and weapons charges. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan this morning and has the latest. Good morning, Sam.
Joe and Savannah, good morning. Outside of the federal courthouse here in Lower Manhattan, and there is just a huge police presence, barricades everywhere ahead of the arrival of deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores. They, along with Maduro's son and 3 of his top lieutenants, have been indicted by a federal grand jury. Specifically, the charges for Maduro include narco-terrorism conspiracy, accusations that he had been working closely with international drug cartels like Tren de Aragua and the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, as well as cocaine importation conspiracy charges and weapons-related charges, all of which, according to the indictment, was part of a process of lining his pockets, as well as those in Maduro's inner circle. In terms of what happened over the weekend, of course, he was captured on Saturday early, flown to upstate New York, and then transferred by helicopter with his wife to a processing center in New York City in the Chelsea neighborhood, where he was fingerprinted, had his mugshot taken, and in video that was actually released by the White House appears to say to agents there, Happy New Year, as he's walking in black sweats and a black hat. He and his wife, Maduro and his wife, were then transported to the Metropolitan Detention Center, or MDC, which is in Brooklyn, is known for having some fairly high-profile inmates. That includes Luigi Mangione, who is still there right now, guys, awaiting trial, as well as Sean Diddy Combs. It is a facility that has been checkered in terms of its past, criticized for terrible conditions there and spates of violence. As far as what's going on later today, this is going to be Maduro's, of course, initial appearance. It's expected to be his arraignment. Some of the big questions going in, how is he planning on pleading, and what will his representation look like? Because you have to remember that Maduro has been under U.S. sanctions personally. Some of his assets have been frozen. It is not even clear whether or not he is allowed to hire an American law firm. Assuming he does get representation either on his own or certainly from a court-assigned attorney, you can be sure that whoever's going to be representing him likely will be filing motions at some point questioning the legality of his capture. So this is really just the first step in the process, and that is expected to begin at noon today. Let me send it back to you.
All right, Sam, thank you very much. Well, for some perspective on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Misty Maris. Misty, good morning. So we just heard Sam there lay out some of these big questions, legal questions about how this is going to work. I just want to start by asking, what do you think a trial like this looks like?
Well, we're talking about a superseding indictment that has a tremendous amount of detail. We call it a speaking indictment. It really tells a story. So what we see, this is going back 25 years, this large-scale narco-terrorism organization utilizing the government as basically a criminal enterprise. So those are the allegations. What I would expect to see, millions of pages of discovery that will be turned over by prosecutors to the defense, and also some of the details in this indictment, specific conversations, specific incidents, tells me that we're likely to see some informants who may be testifying in court.
It appears like we're covering some perhaps new legal ground here, questions that maybe we haven't answered before, haven't answered in a long time. What do you see as some of the challenges that lay in the way before we even get to a trial, some of the questions that might have to be answered?
Well, there's no question that Maduro is going to challenge this arrest. He's going to challenge it on the basis of violating international law, due process, as well as what's called head of state immunity. Basically, can't bring a criminal case against a head of state for executing their duties. So all of those are going to be threshold questions. I would expect whomever his defense attorneys are to be bringing those motions in the very near future after today's proceeding.
Part of the U.S.'s answer to that, right, is sort of that he's not recognized as the head of state by the United States. Is that right? Is that how we answer that?
Yes, so that is right. And we're looking back at the Noriega case. So this is, in 1989, a case brought against the leader of Panama, who was not an elected official. So the argument is slightly different. But the question is whether or not immunity will actually attach. And so as of 2019, Maduro was not recognized as the leader. So this is something that's going to be kind of a new question. Noriega's challenges were unsuccessful, but that's a slightly different factual scenario, and it will require the courts to make that determination.
You said a moment ago, whoever his attorneys are, we don't know right now. Can you even begin to imagine who takes on a case like this, what type of expertise they need to have?
So I would imagine that there would be a lot of lawyers who have expertise in novel constitutional issues that would be chomping at the bit to actually take this case on, because this is such a consequential case for some of these issues. But there, as Sam pointed out, there could be some challenges based on perhaps frozen assets or the fact that there are sanctions, and whether or not an American law firm is going to be able to do business with Maduro without special authorization from the Department of Treasury. So there's some issues here, but we might see that he has assigned counsel. It's something I'm going to be looking for at today's proceeding.
One of the things that we've heard invoked by the Secretary of State and a few others when it comes to the U.S.'s argument is the idea of self-defense here. How does that work in a case like this?
Well, so there's two different reasons that you keep hearing about the reasoning behind this operation. One is to get ahead of a challenge that Maduro will inevitably bring, which is that this arrest was illegal under international law. And one of the threshold questions will be, what was the purpose of the operation? Was it law enforcement to bring back a fugitive? Self-defense is going to relate to whether or not Congress needed to be informed of this or approval. Is this an act of war, or was this a law enforcement operation? So these are some of the questions that will have to be answered, whether or not this is the president's powers under Article 2 or congressional input was needed.
All right, Misty Maris, thank you very much. Always great to have you with us.
Thank you.
There are growing questions this morning about the lack of congressional input ahead of this operation. The president ordered the attack while Congress was on recess for the holidays. Now, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are demanding answers as they return to work today. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us with that part of the story. Ryan, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. And you're right. Congressional leaders have a lot of questions about the legality of the Trump administration's actions in South America. And they also want to know what their plans are for the future. Answers may come later today as top administration officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, will be on Capitol Hill for a high-level briefing. And as Congress returns to Washington this week, they're going to push to be involved in what happens next. Congress returns to session this week facing a surprising new challenge after the Trump administration attacked Venezuela without alerting congressional leaders, a move that did not bother most Republicans.
Thank you, President Trump, for taking the action to protect American lives, to protect American interests.
Many Democrats feel much differently, calling it illegal and dangerous.
Clearly, this is wildly illegal. This is a president who has been operating illegally since he was sworn into office.
Democrats believe the administration should have come to Congress to ask for authorization to launch the attack. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio disagrees.
That couldn't require congressional approval because this was not an invasion.
But there's little appetite on Capitol Hill for the U.S. taking the lead on rebuilding a nation.
My understanding of America First is strictly for the American people, not foreign countries that demand their priorities put first over Americans.
Across the country, the reaction has been divided.
When I wake up in the morning and I see the news, Maduro is
capture it. Oh my God, thank you, God.
We do not stand with this, with these illegal attacks.
Some celebrating from a rally in South Florida to Venezuelan Americans on the West Coast.
We have been screaming freedom for a decade.
But in other places, protests against the administration's military action and new worries of a prolonged conflict.
This is just another America imperialist invasion. They're trying to seize Venezuela's oil.
Now, in addition to the briefings that congressional leaders are expecting to get this week on the strike in Venezuela, the Senate will also hold a vote on a bipartisan resolution that's designed to avoid a war in Venezuela without clear congressional authorization. It was a resolution drafted before this weekend's attack. Joe.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. Let's keep this conversation going with Adelis Farrow. She is the executive director of the Venezuelan American Caucus. Adelis, good to have you with us. First, just what was your reaction to the dramatic events that unfolded over the weekend and the capture of Maduro?
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation, Joe, Savannah. My reaction. Okay, Nicolás Maduro is a criminal and it was a brutal dictator. And I feel really relieved to saying that he was a brutal dictator. His detention to face justice is something millions of Venezuelans have waited for. We celebrate that he's finally facing accountability for his multiple crimes. But removing Maduro is not the same as restoring democracy. There are also, and I have, serious questions about how this operation was carried out and whether legal and constitutional norms were respected. Congress was absolutely bypassed, and that's something that is very worrisome. More troubling for me is that the Trump administration has explicitly stated and reaffirmed last night that it will negotiate with the regime that remains in power under Delcy Rodriguez. Delcy Rodriguez, who is, by the way, right now taking power in Venezuela, is no alternative to Maduro. She is just as responsible, and the entire corrupt criminal power structure remains intact under her presidency. I want to say this, and I want your audience to understand what is going on in Venezuela right now. That is the regime they are choosing to work with. At the same time, they have openly dismissed and sidelined the legitimate democratic leadership of Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo González Urrutia, who was elected president in July 2024. Venezuelans didn't just vote. We documented and presented the tallies and evidence of that result. Ignoring that reality is not a democratic transition, Joe. If the goal is democracy, the United States must respect the Venezuelan people's vote and uphold the rule of law, not negotiate with a dictatorship for convenience or oil.
Adelis, we're also hearing, as of course you are, President Trump's pledge to run the country, to take over the vast oil reserves here. We had Secretary Marco Rubio telling our Kristen Welker that the idea here is that they will be running the policy within the country. How does that sound to you, and how do you think it sounds to other Venezuelans as an option? And what would you like to see in the interim, if not something like that?
First of all, what running the country means. That's something that I don't think they know. I mean, it is something is so bizarre and everything is so confused, but I can tell you how I feel. And I know it reflects what many Venezuelans feel. Saying that they are going to run the country, take control of Venezuelan oil, and place the regime under tutelage without that meaning in any way a return to democracy in Venezuela is devastating. All of this is happening while Venezuelans here continue to be treated as disposable as immigrants here in the United States. As this entire situation is used to try to deport as many Venezuelans as possible, as quickly as possible. They just said that yesterday. Secretary Noem actually invited all Venezuelans to go back to Venezuela yesterday. We are not trying to get rid of a dictatorship here and survive it only to become someone else's colony. Venezuelans want democracy, sovereignty, and the right to decide our own future. Framing Venezuela as a country to be run by the United States or treating Venezuelan oil as a prize to be taken repeats the same logic of exploitation that has hurt us for decades. Bipartisan support for democracy is always welcome, but control is not.
So when it comes to immigrants here in the U.S., then, what is your primary message to the Trump administration right now?
We have been the political pawns for the Trump administration for years now. The collateral damage. We are the victims. We are in the middle of all of this mess, of all of these decisions, of all of this persecution. We have been haunted in the United States for years. The 2025 has been the worst year any Venezuelan immigrant in the United States has ever lived. And I think it is very important to tell the Trump administration that hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans, specifically more than 600,000 Venezuelans that have TPS right now in the United States, because for every 10 Venezuelans, at least 6 have TPS. They need protection. We fled that same country they just attacked in order to take Maduro out of power. We fled that dictatorship. We fled the same dictatorship that is now protected by the U.S. and presided by Delcy Rodriguez, who apparently is now being recognized by the Trump administration. We are the victims here. We need protection. There are so many people suffering from terror, uncertainty, persecution here in the United States, and still we don't have a country to go back to.
Adela Sfera, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about this.
Thank you for letting your audience what is going on.
Let's bring in local journalist Ana Vanessa Herrero. She is on the ground in Venezuela. Very good to have you back with us this hour. Thank you for joining us. So Delcy Rodriguez being sworn in as Venezuela's new president. Let's talk a bit about her, what her message is to the Trump administration as she assumes this new role, and just having heard Adelis describe her in the way that she did. Give us more context.
Yeah, well, it's not clear what her message will be, her fixed message. Because up until Saturday, we were hearing Juan Delcy Rodriguez, and then suddenly on Sunday, we heard another person, a change of heart, a different narrative, than a different tone than the ones that we're used to hear from her. So let's go back to the beginning. Delcy Rodriguez has been, for the longest time, not only a supporter of Nicolás Maduro and first Hugo Chavez, but also a fierce critic of Donald Trump and U.S. policies against not only Venezuela, but the rest of the region of South America. So what exactly is her new narrative going to be, and how that is going to be translated? It's still yet to come. And we are hoping to get a glimpse of exactly that, at least today, after she gets sworn in in the National Assembly. That is what we are expecting. And, with her first official address to the nation.
How do people in Venezuela feel about President Trump saying the U.S. is going to run the country and take control of its vast oil reserves? What's some of the reaction you're hearing about that?
Well, that is very interesting, because inside Venezuela, I mean, this is a huge issue for people abroad, international analysts, and for the international arena. But inside Venezuela, people are still trying to understand what just happened on Saturday. So we are looking at some sort of shock wave that still hangs on the Venezuelan population. But still, I did speak with some people on Sunday, and those who address this issue that you're talking about, they have different views. One of the views is, we don't care. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here. We don't care who runs. I mean, if they want to run the country, then great. as long as Maduro and his team are not in Venezuela. And then the other side is, and I was talking to a woman specifically, and she said that she draws the line right there, that Venezuela is for Venezuelans, and are Venezuelans the ones who should decide the future of the country.
Anna, I was struck on Saturday when President Trump said that the opposition leader, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, that he said people in Venezuela don't want her to be in power. What was your reaction when you heard that? What is it people in Venezuela actually feel when it comes to that?
Well, he said that she didn't have the support, and we really don't know what he meant, because we don't know if he was talking about, for example, military support, which could very well be the case. The opposition for the longest time has wanted to reach out and grab to that military support, because the military is the base of the Venezuelan government. It has been that way since Hugo Chavez started in '99. And but if he was talking about popular support, then really we don't understand why he's saying that, because up until recently she had the support of the people, and just last year, 2024. Edmundo González and Maria Corina Machado were able to get over 70% of the votes in the presidential election that was widely seen as fraudulent by the international community, even by Nicolás Maduro's supporters in the region, after she showed the world the vote tallies that would prove her victory. So we really don't know what he meant, but still we haven't heard anyone from the opposition address that issue specifically. So we don't know what internally they're talking about on that.
All right, Ana Vanessa Herrero, thank you very much for joining us. Well, the military action in Venezuela on Saturday is also causing travel disruptions for many Americans this morning. The FAA lifted its airspace restriction over Caribbean airspace on Sunday, allowing flights to resume. But in just those few hours, the restrictions triggered mass flight cancellations, leaving tens of thousands of people stranded, especially during these holidays at those holiday destinations. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has the latest on this angle here. Tom, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, this has been a huge headache for those trying to get back home after the holidays. A weekend that is typically one of the busiest of the year to begin with, made even more difficult. Really, I count thousands of Americans, tens of thousands, finding that their flights have been canceled and the options to rebook limited. More than 48 hours after the U.S. Maduro operation, thousands of Americans remained stranded abroad this morning, with airlines scrambling to catch up following temporary airspace restrictions over parts of the Caribbean and Venezuela.
San Juan Center airspace is closed for the next 24 hours for military operations.
Those restrictions, triggered by military operations, lifted Sunday, impacting more than a dozen airports and forcing more than 1,000 flight cancellations. The disruptions piling up and causing chaos.
It's been a mess. We've been delayed more than 6 hours.
At Miami International Airport, a hub for Latin American and Caribbean flights, many passengers left frustrated and confused.
These people are all waiting to figure out where their bag is at.
After more than 100 flights in Miami were canceled on Saturday, which resulted in baggage delivery delays and rebooking congestion in the immediate aftermath of Operation Absolute Resolve, America's attack in Venezuela. Radar shows flights steering clear of the restricted areas.
I don't know that anyone anticipated waking up to something like this, but I would really like to get home.
The temporary restrictions during one of the busiest weekends of the year after the long holiday stretch.
I'm specifically in St. Vincent, and they said we cannot leave until either Thursday or Friday. The price gouging is crazy because we've been seeing flights for like $3,000.
Nearly 600 miles away from Caracas, Venezuela, the Schwartz family was stuck in St. Bart's trying to get back home.
There are no flights from here. The boats are booked. It's total chaos here.
Yeah, total chaos. Listen, the airlines, American, JetBlue, Delta, Southwest, all of those carriers that have big operations in the Caribbean say that they have been adding flights and adding seats to try to get people moving. But just a word of caution, while the airspace has been reopened, the FAA still has airport advisories in that area because of the pending military operations, guys. So it's really going to be a day-by-day kind of thing as the airlines try to get everybody back home again.
All right. Tom, thank you very much.
Flood watches are in place for parts of the West Coast this morning. For a closer look, time for your morning News Now weather.
Yeah, we have Andrea Romero here in studio with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Savannah and Joe. And the soggy, unsettled weather pattern continues for parts of California. We can see the rain right now moving into coastal areas, extending into the Central Valley from San Francisco all the way up into Crescent City. This is precisely the area that's under a flood watch and will continue to be under a flood watch throughout the whole day. That's because that's where we can have that elevated risk of flash flooding and landslides as that moisture continues to move onshore. More rain and snow will be stretching across the west, but it will begin to dry out for tomorrow over parts of California, but the mountain snow and the rain will be targeting the Pacific Northwest as another Pacific system will be moving through this area, bringing snow showers that will be expanding into the Rockies, as we can see through Wednesday. So as far as additional rainfall for today into Tuesday, we're looking at maybe 1 to 3 inches, especially along coastal regions, locally up to 4 inches in those areas where we can have some localized flooding. And of course, we have 1 to 3 possibly feet of snow that can fall in those higher elevations in the Sierra Nevada, up into the Cascades, and of course, the northern Rockies. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, we have back-to-back clipper systems that will be impacting the area from the Midwest into New England. We're talking about the first system moving through today, bringing some light snow across parts of New England with accumulations that will be light but will cause some slick travel. The second system that will be moving through tomorrow, that one carries a little bit more of a punch, and we're looking at a wintry mess of rain, snow, and ice that will be moving through New England, ending on Wednesday as some early showers, maybe some snow showers across the interior area. So as far as snowfall forecasts with these two systems, we're talking about 1 to possibly maybe 6 inches of snowfall, especially over parts of northern New York. And we are also worried about the ice accumulation that could be possible across the northern tier of the country. Completely different story in the southern plains. We're talking about that warm start that continues. Record high temperatures are possible today into parts of this week, as we can see all these record temperatures are possible along the Midwest. But that, of course, comes with a risk, and that's the fire risk that we could have over the Texas Panhandle throughout the day today. And that's all for the weather today. Back to you guys.
Thank you so much. Lots to watch out for there. Thanks, Andrea. See you in a bit.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, we're going to take a closer look at how the U.S. attack on Venezuela is impacting the global oil markets.
Up first, though, mixed reactions. How America's actions are drawing both praise and condemnation from across the world. We have more on that for you up next. We're back now with a closer look at how the U.S. action in Venezuela has been drawing mixed reaction from around the world. While some countries like China are calling Maduro's arrest a violation of international law, other nations in the region and some Venezuelan refugees are praising President Trump's actions. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez is in northeastern Colombia. This is right on the border with Venezuela. He joins us with more. Gabe, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Several Latin American countries, including Colombia and Mexico, have issued a joint statement condemning the U.S. operation in Venezuela. And meanwhile, President Trump is ramping up his rhetoric against Colombia's president as the military here, which you can see set up behind me, braces for what's next.
This morning, there is profound uncertainty in the Caribbean following those stunning U.S. airstrikes on Venezuela over the weekend. At first, the streets of Venezuela's capital, Caracas, were eerily empty. Now, armed pro-government civilians are patrolling outside supermarkets. Neighboring Colombia is bracing for an influx of refugees and ramping up security, fearing a new wave of cartel violence. At Venezuela's border, Patricia Lopez crossing with her 2 young sons, hoping to ride out the uncertainty, at least for now, with relatives here in Colombia.
¿Cómo te sientes? How do you feel right now?
The truth is, I'm in shock, she says. I don't believe what's happening right now. As reaction poured in last night, President Trump also turning his gaze to another South American country, fielding questions about the U.S.'s future throughout the region, as he condemned Colombia's president.
Run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long.
Asked if there will be a U.S. operation in Colombia,
It sounds good to me.
Colombia's government, which has strongly denied being involved in drug trafficking, responding overnight, calling Trump's statements contrary to the norms of international law. Trump discussing other countries in the region, including Mexico, condemning its alleged role in the drug trade.
Mexico has to get their act together. We're going to have to do something.
And saying this of Cuba.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall.
While the U.S.'s actions are facing fierce opposition in Havana. Cuba's president saying the U.S. had no moral or legal authority to forcibly remove Venezuela's leader, as state TV announced 2 days of mourning for the 32 Cubans killed while attempting to protect Maduro.
President Trump was asked about another foreign policy priority, Greenland. The president said that he'd worry about it in a few months, but he reiterated his desire to take over the territory for national security. The Danish prime minister calling that idea a fantasy. Savannah.
All right, Gabe, thank you very much. Let's now bring in Jeff Ramsey. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Latin America Center. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. So we just had our colleague there, Gabe, reporting from Colombia, right along the border with Venezuela. And I think that sets up a great conversation to have about just sort of the network within Latin America, the allies that exist or do not, the balance of power. Walk us through what the Maduro regime meant in that context.
Sure. Well, good morning, Savannah. So far, we've seen pretty strong reactions from more left-wing governments in the region. So we've seen this joint statement from Brazil and Colombia and a few other more left-wing governments. But there's been a few governments that are more on the center-right or right side of the spectrum that have been largely supportive of this action, the governments of Ecuador, El Salvador, and several others. So, I think we can say this is breaking down along ideological lines. But regardless of what these governments are saying publicly, I think we can assume that they're all watching closely to see whether this is going to affect regional stability, and in particular, whether this is going to lead to another wave of Venezuelan migrants and refugees. There's over 8 million Venezuelans that have fled that country in recent years.
This isn't the first time the U.S. has engineered a regime change in Latin America. We've sort of had one big reference point this morning that we've been discussing with our viewers for something like this. But historically, how did something like that go? What lessons have we learned?
Well, I think the last time we saw something like this happen was 35 years ago with the U.S. invasion of Panama. It has to be said, this is a much lighter U.S. footprint. Secretary Rubio yesterday says there's currently no boots on the ground in Venezuela, although President Trump is not ruling that out. I think, this fits with the preferences of this administration. This is a White House that prefers quick wins and little foreign entanglements while advancing U.S. supremacy, particularly in the Western Hemisphere as it relates to pushing out the influence of Russia, China, Iran, and others.
Thinking about that, what do you think a way forward for Venezuela looks like? Because as we've been having discussions this morning, first there's the point about, President Trump, his administration, Secretary Rubio essentially saying that the U.S. is stepping in, is running policy, even taking over these oil reserves. And then we've heard from Venezuelans themselves, some saying, the vice president who's being sworn in as the president is essentially just an extension of the Maduro regime. And then some also questioning the president's statements where he essentially said that people of Venezuela do not want the opposition leader, even though she had won the popular vote prior. What do you think means democracy for this country? Of all those things I just laid out there, what is a realistic path to something that is good for the people of Venezuela?
So I think the first step is to stabilize the country, and I think that's what this administration is doing, and that's why they're working with the de facto interim president, led by Maduro's former vice president. It's true that she's an ideological supporter of the ousted former leader, but she's just issued a statement late last night in which she promises to work with the United States and calls for dialogue. It really seems like the White House is interested in deepening a relationship with Delcy Rodriguez. Although, as we've heard from Secretary Rubio and others, I think there will be an interest in some kind of a roadmap for free and fair elections down the line.
For people who watch and are skeptical and think, well, if she was essentially the vice president of the person who was forcibly removed from the country and, to use your word, ideologically aligned with Maduro, how do you go from that to creating an environment that truly is a democracy for the people of Venezuela? Do you think that's possible with this leader?
I think it's going to take time. I think it's going to be very complicated, and it's probably going to be gradual, and it's not going to be overnight. But I do think that, any path towards a democratic transition in Venezuela is going to have to include liberating the over 800 political prisoners in the country, some kind of a clear roadmap for free and fair elections. I think that's going to take a lot of time to build, but the U.S. has plenty of leverage to make sure that that happens.
Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. Very fascinating conversation. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, oil impact. Oil prices swung overnight after President Trump claimed that American companies are eager to invest in Venezuela's reserves. What this could mean for the average consumer filling up at the gas pump, that is next. We're back now with a look at how the U.S. attack on Venezuela is impacting the global oil market. Overnight, oil prices swung as investors and traders weighed President Trump's plans to tap the country's massive reserves, the largest in the world. Last night, Mr. Trump once again claimed that American companies are eager to invest in its oil industry.
So we're going to have the big oil companies go in, and they're going to fix the infrastructure, and they're going to invest money. We're not going to invest anything. I have.
Which ones? Have you seen any commitments?
All of them, basically.
Any commitments from the oil companies?
They want to go in so badly.
For more, let's bring in oil expert and founding partner at Again Capital, John Kilduff. John, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. So just walk us through what we've seen in oil prices since markets resumed trading.
Last night, initially, they did trade down fractionally and then recovered to an unchanged really position. And I think it's the right move by the oil market because really nothing on the ground in Venezuela has changed as it relates certainly to oil. For example, even the embargo or the quarantine of shipping remains in effect. And in fact, there's word that several tankers have turned off their transponders and are making a run for it. So the hope that we might see some additional oil on the market immediately has faded for now. But, my contention remains that once things can get settled and once the U.S. green lights, shipping and oil activity, that there will be additional slug of oil on the market, ready-made crude oil for U.S. Gulf Coast refiners, and lower prices ahead at the pump for consumers.
What are some of the different market forces traders and investors are currently weighing with regard to Venezuela?
Well, certainly there's a big debate over how quickly that this industry can be recovered. There was a lot of damage done to it, obviously. But when President Trump talks about the major oil companies dying to get back in there, they are, because Conoco has over $10 billion invested in Venezuela that was stolen from them. Exxon, Chevron as well. So they have major investments. They are well acquainted with the landscape, with what needs to be done, how to operate there, how to handle that heavy sour crude, which will go to their Gulf Coast refiners, again, because of its nature. It's a very heavy, sour, sludgy crude, but our U.S. refiners along the Gulf Coast were built for that. So they are dying to go back in there so that they can recover their investment first and foremost.
What does this all mean for the average U.S. consumer who's just concerned about filling up their car with gas?
So, look, over the past 10 years, U.S. shale production has come on the market in a big way and has blunted some of the geopolitical risks that we would stare down over the decades regarding oil production, whether from the Middle East in particular. This would add another reliable source of oil as we look ahead, and that would bring A, stability, and B, lower prices on a more sustained basis without any regard or concern for what's happening in the crazy days that always seem to haunt us in the Middle East. Also, too, if the administration is going to make similar moves on Iran, that would be another source of stability for oil supply. Oil prices go lower and can stay down, as we've seen, once we know that there's some security of supply. And that's what we're on the cusp of here with Venezuela. I'm not saying Venezuela gets back to its heyday of almost 4 million barrels per day of production, but they can certainly add 500,000 to 1 million barrels a day within a year or so's time, which would help keep these oil prices down closer to 50, maybe even the 40s as we go forward.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Important information for Americans. Appreciate it. Let's get a look now at what is making other financial headlines, including the AI chatbot that's under investigation by 2 countries for creating sexualized deepfakes. NBC News business and economy reporter Emily Lorsch has our Money Minute. Hey, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Good morning. That's right. France and Malaysia have joined India in condemning Grok for generating sexualized deepfake images of women and minors, raising serious legal and safety concerns. Grok, the bot that's built by Elon Musk's XAI, prompted to post an apology after admitting it created explicit images of girls. India has ordered X to restrict Grok and respond within 72 hours. Authorities in France and Malaysia say they're looking into these incidents. And one of the world's biggest tech shows is back. CES 2026 kicks off in Las Vegas this week, bringing together thousands to showcase advances in AI, robotics, healthcare, vehicles, wearables, and gaming. Organizers expect attendance to match last year's nearly 150,000 visitors as companies use CES to signal what consumers may soon see in 2026 and beyond. Finally, James Cameron has done it again. His film Avatar: Fire and Ash has crossed the $1 billion mark worldwide, his 4th movie to do so. The box office numbers also reinforced Disney's dominance in 2025, with Avatar and Zootopia 2 leading the global weekend, bringing in about $170 million and $82 million, respectively. The big question now, can Fire and Ash eclipse $2 billion like its 2 Avatar predecessors? Savannah, I think we're just going to have to wait and find out.
Definitely. I've been seeing those ads everywhere. And all the airports, massive ads for it. So we'll see. All right. Thank you so much. Well, coming up, alarming rise. Hospitals nationwide are reporting upticks in flu cases as millions of Americans return to school and the office after the holidays. The symptoms experts warn you should look out for and how you can protect yourself. That's all up next. Welcome back. With hospitals nationwide reporting a significant uptick in flu cases, there are growing concerns about a serious spike as millions of Americans head back to school or back to work this week. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda joins us with the latest on this. Emily, good morning.
Hey there. Good morning to you. If you haven't had the flu, chances are you at least know someone who has been dealing with those dreaded body aches, coughing fits, and fevers. And now doctors urging caution as many return to the workplace, with the number of infections and hospitalizations climbing to levels not seen in years.
With the holidays in the rearview mirror and millions heading back to school and work this morning, health experts now warning of what is circulating amid their return.
My whole family getting the flu was not on my bucket list for 2026.
Driven by a mutated H3N2 variant, which some have dubbed the super flu, infections are flaring nationwide. 29 states are seeing high or very high flu-like activity even before all of those holiday gatherings, according to the CDC.
We're seeing high fever, sore throat, cough, body aches.
Northwell's Dr. Jennifer Goebel says with this flu, patients are sicker for longer.
We're just seeing more cases, which is creating more volume, which is creating busier EDs.
New York State just reported its highest number of flu hospitalizations in a week on record. And across the country, the CDC estimates more than 80,000 people have been hospitalized amid this brutal flu season. Influencer Paul J. Kim recently opening up about the death of his 5-year-old son.
He got influenza, a really insane case of the flu, and it caused him to go septic.
Last week, officials in Kentucky and Ohio reported their first pediatric flu deaths of the season, while some hospitals in Maryland and North Carolina are ramping up precautions, adding new protocols in the new year, including masking and limiting visitors. The surge of sickness sending hundreds to their local pharmacies like this one.
We're going through tons of Tamiflu, the pills, the liquids, the antibiotics with that.
Experts say in addition to the flu vaccine, the best way to protect yourself is to clean your hands and surfaces frequently. Try to avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, and use air purifiers or bring in fresh outside air until the season of winter viruses wanes.
Ugh, Emily, when is the peak of flu season? How much longer is this going to get worse?
Well, a little bit of bad news here because you consider the fact that the holidays are just winding down and all of these millions of people are just returning to their routine. So doctors say that they're anticipating to see an increase in infections for still several weeks now. But remember, the flu season, it traditionally goes into the spring. So doctors are saying, okay, you still can get your flu shot. It still is of value. It takes about 2 weeks to see that full effect. But, you know, when you travel around the holidays, you're dodging all the coughing and the sneezing.
So true.
I'm like knocking on wood. It's like a wonder I haven't.
No, I know.
Yet.
We were just saying, yeah, we've been lucky so far, but I did notice that traveling. A lot of people seem sick. Emily, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Well, coming up, playoff picture with the regular NFL season officially over. We're looking ahead to next weekend's playoffs. Who are the teams to watch? That's coming up next. We are back now with the road to Super Bowl 60. It's now officially set in stone. The NFL regular season came to a thrilling close last night after a busy weekend, which featured every team across the league. With division titles on the line, several teams were fighting to punch their ticket into the playoffs until the final seconds of the season. Now the stage is set for the first round of the playoffs that's coming this weekend. For more on the road to the Super Bowl, we are happy to have our friend, host of Front Office Sports Today, Baker Machado, with us. Baker, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I just told you I woke up in a sad, sad household with the Ravens.
What a game that was last night on Sunday Night Football.
Didn't stay up for the whole thing, which I hope is understandable. However, I saw the score. I have a sad husband. But let's talk through what we saw yesterday.
Last night, going down to a thrilling finish last night to see who was going to win the AFC North last night. As you mentioned, the Ravens missing a game-winning field goal basically as time expired last night, punching the ticket for Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers to make it back into the playoffs. This is the wild card weekend that we got. We got a couple games on Saturday, a bunch of games on Sunday. So we've got the Rams and the Panthers and the Packers and the Bears on Saturday. That's going to be a really good one. But I love the matchups on Sunday. Okay. Those are the good ones. You have the Buffalo Bills and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Buffalo Bills have not won a road game since the 1990s in the playoffs against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have won 8 straight games. And then you have pretty much the best matchup of the day. You have San Francisco versus the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. That game, by the way, the Eagles are only favored by 1.5, so that's essentially a pick'em game right there. But then you have the teams that aren't on that schedule. The Denver Broncos punched their ticket for the #1 seed in the AFC with their win against the Chargers. That is the first time the Broncos have been the #1 seed in the AFC since 2015, when Peyton Manning took them to the Super Bowl at Super Bowl 50, interestingly in San Francisco, where the Super Bowl will be at this year.
Wow. Okay. Lots of fun facts there. I vote for the Ravens or cheer for them or whatever the term is because of my husband.
Maybe next year.
But obviously also the Chiefs not making it eliminates the Taylor Swift factor.
And there's the big question of what happens with Travis Kelce also.
Oh, absolutely.
He has mentioned he's not going to announce what his new plans are going to be if he's going to retire or not until March. So he's going to leave us hanging for a little bit.
Oh, my gosh. All right. Tell us about some other matchups that you are particularly excited about to see two teams going head-to-head.
So I mentioned 49ers, Eagles, obviously a great one. Bills and Jaguars. Another big one on Saturday that a lot of people haven't been talking about is the Packers versus the Bears. The Bears really went from a team that had been in the basement for so many years. They have their coach for their first year in Ben Johnson, who likely could win Coach of the Year. The Bears back in the playoffs and hosting this game against the Packers, but they have not beaten the Packers in the playoffs since 2010. So that's going to be a really exciting one to watch. The Bears, by the way, only a 1.5 favorite in that one. And then, of course, because the Ravens lost, you have the Steelers playing on Monday Night Football next week against the Texans. The Texans have one of the hottest teams right now in football right now. The Steelers have never played the Texans in the playoffs, so that one's going to be really exciting to watch as well.
Well, if you think about like Super Bowl, I know we're ways out. I'm not going to make you tell me who you think is going to be in it, but anybody that you think could sort of be a surprise that makes a deep run.
Well, right now the two #1 seeds, Seattle and Denver, have the best odds to win the Super Bowl. But one team a lot of people aren't talking about, which was one of the hottest teams in football, is the LA Rams. They actually have the second best odds to win the Super Bowl, and they are a 10.5-point favorite this weekend against the Carolina Panthers. So that could definitely be a team to watch. Also, the Philadelphia Eagles, as I mentioned, the reigning Super Bowl champs, they're also in the top 4 in terms of teams to watch this year in terms of the odds to win the Super Bowl this year.
All right. Lots of football coming up the next couple of weeks. Baker, thank you so much. Great to have you with us as always, and Happy New Year. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Thank you very much for joining us on a busy first Monday of 2026. We hope your holidays were incredible. You got some great time in with your family. We appreciate you being here. The news continues right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.